Republicans just passed a bill that rewards federal agencies for illegally withholding money that Congress already appropriated, and Democrats stood up and called it exactly what it is, a blank check for Donald Trump to ignore the Constitution. And one congressman referenced an op-ed calling Republicans non-player characters who refuse to stand up for their own constitutional authority while Trump violates federal law. And then a Republican defended the bill by saying we're $38 trillion in debt, so agencies should be incentivized to not spend money Congress told them to spend. And somehow this is being sold as government efficiency and fiscal responsibility. So this past week, the House Oversight Committee held a markup session on H.R. 5438, the Incentivized Savings Act. That's where they debate and vote on bills before sending them to the full House. And what came out of that markup is one of the clearest examples of Republicans abandoning their constitutional duty to protect Congress's power of the purse while Trump's administration illegally freezes funds across the country. Representative John Walkinshaw from Virginia and Representative Robert Menendez from California spent about 10 minutes absolutely destroying the Republican argument for this bill, explaining how it rewards illegal behavior and encourages future administrations to violate the law. Take a look at this and I'll give you my breakdown at the end.
Strongly oppose this legislation. Despite advocating for agency incentives to identify savings, it contains significant legal, constitutional, and technical problems that would make it both harmful and unworkable. The Trump administration, as we know, has taken drastic actions to illegally withhold and impound funds that it's opposed to in violation of appropriations law. And this is a bill that would actually incentivize those actions. The GAO has already found at least 5 instances to date of the Trump administration violating the Impoundment Control Act, the law, and more of those decisions could come in the future. The administration illegally froze and cut federal funding for 5 states. OMB also announced a government-wide initiative to identify federal spending provided to state, local, and tribal governments, colleges, and nonprofits in 14 states and D.C. that all voted against President Trump in the 2024 election. This bill would signal to the Trump administration that it endorses their illegal impoundment and withholding of funds that belong to the American people, undermining Congress's power of the purse, and it would reward those actions. All congressional appropriations that have not been spent by the end of its appropriation are already returned to the Treasury. This bill instead splits those unexpended funds, where less than half would return to the Treasury. Another 49% would be extended for another year, and 2% would be paid to employees in the form of retention bonuses. Rather than producing savings, CBO will likely estimate a high score for this bill. It will cost money. In addition, the bill contains a series of technical issues that would make it almost impossible to execute. I, like all Democrats on the Oversight Committee and the Congress, want federal agencies to identify savings and eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse in programs and activities wherever possible. And we have a number of good bipartisan bills today that will do that. Unfortunately, this bill would not. I urge my colleagues to oppose it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seek recognition on this bill? Chair recognizes Mr. Wynn.
Min?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Comer. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. So last year, Ezra Klein wrote an op-ed. It was titled "The Republican Party's NPC Problem and Ours." And the gist of that is that House Republicans, congressional Republicans, were very comfortable conceding authority to Trump, that they were acting as non-player characters, to use a video game term, and not expressing any agency in standing up for Congress's constitutional prerogatives. Our Article 1 authority is very clear that we have exclusive rights and authorities to appropriate money. And what we've seen over the last 12 months is Donald Trump and this administration, Elon Musk, who's an on-again, off-again buddy of Trump, deciding that they're going to illegally and unconstitutionally infringe upon our Article 1 appropriations authority. And this bill, as Rep. Walkinshaw eloquently expressed, incentivizes future administrations to do the exact same thing. And so I would urge my Republican colleagues to not be non-player characters, to stand up for our constitutional rights here. This is a permanent infringement that you are authorizing and incentivizing. You are basically telling the Trump administration and future administrations that they can ignore Congress, their agencies can withhold funding, and that will just be fine. And in the future, it might be to states like yours, some of the states you represent. It might be to programs that you care about. And so I urge my Republican colleagues to stand up. This bill is just poorly constructed. It is poorly thought out. It creates adverse incentives and really ex post facto authorizes and condones the unconstitutional and illegal behavior we've seen in violating the Impoundment Control Act and infringing upon our Article I authority. So stand up for our constitutional rights, be members of Congress, protect our constitutional authorities here. With that, I yield back.
Chair recognizes you have a unanimous, Chair, for what purpose does Mr. Walker-Child seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from CREW, the Project on Government Oversight, Protect Democracy and Public Citizen, which states that the Incentivized Savings Act would, quote, create fiscal chaos rather than fiscal savings.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support responsible use of taxpayer dollars, but Congress, not the executive branch, controls federal spending. At a time when this body, under Republican leadership, has chosen to cede our congressional authority over and over and over again to the president, this bill is the exact opposite of what we need. Congress, all of us, need to stand up for our constitutional mandate and protect our appropriations authority, pure and simple. Russ Vought, the head of the OMB and the architect of Project 2025, has been wreaking havoc across our communities by illegally withholding funds, rescinding grants, and reallocating money without the authorization of Congress. From the very beginning of last year, right after Trump's inauguration, we heard from organization after organization after organization in our communities who unexpectedly had their funds frozen and have lived in chaos ever since. That's why the very first bill I introduced was the Office of Management and Budget Inspector General Act. We have to ensure that independent, nonpartisan oversight of the OMB exists so that we can prevent unlawful withholding of funds. H.R. 5438, the bill we are debating today, does the opposite. It rewards agencies for not spending funds Congress has already appropriated, encouraging illegal impoundment. GAO, an independent, nonpartisan watchdog, has found multiple violations of the Impoundment Control Act. Mr. Min laid them out, Mr. Walkinshaw laid them out. We have to stand up for our congressional authority. Congress should not enable this behavior. This bill would increase spending, not reduce it, and it would continue to give this rogue administration a blank check. I oppose the Incentivized Savings Act, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I support this bill. Our republic is $38 trillion in debt. That's $38,000 billion. If we were to run a $1 billion surplus, balance the budget, and run a $1 billion surplus in this body, it would require 38,000 years of billion-dollar surplus. We don't have 38,000 years to fix this thing. We have to rein in federal spending, eliminate waste, fraud, abuse, and theft. And constitutionally, under Article 1, Congress authorizes a project or an endeavor for the federal government and then funds through appropriations that authorized federal government action. And then under Article 2, the executive branch has administrative authority, and they're responsible for spending the money and executing the federal endeavor that was authorized and funded by Congress. And within the framework of the execution of that federal endeavor, the executive branch has a responsibility to audit the bureaucratic performance of that authorized and funded endeavor, and they're responsible to identify what's cited in this law as incompetence and failure. And we have a responsibility to control the expenditures therein. Money that Congress authorizes and appropriates for a particular purpose must be executed in a manner that's reflective of an absence of incompetence and failure, waste, fraud, abuse, and theft. This is common sense. So the American citizenry that we serve, Mr. Chairman, demands enhanced control of their treasure, because it is their treasure. There's no such thing as federal money. Every dollar that comes into this town has been seized from the paycheck of an American working citizen. I vigorously support this bill and many like it that codifies the efforts of President Trump's team and this executive branch, which is determined to eliminate waste, fraud, abuse, and theft from the federal sphere of spending that has driven us to a $38 trillion debt. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
All right, let's talk about what you just watched, because this is how you legalize corruption. You pass a bill that rewards the illegal behavior that's already happening. Representative Walkinshaw just laid out exactly why this bill is a disaster, and Republicans passed it anyway. Here's what the Incentivized Savings Act actually does. It allows federal agencies to keep 49% of their unspent appropriated funds for an additional year if they identify those funds as unnecessary. Another 2% goes to employee bonuses for identifying the waste, and 49% supposedly goes toward paying down the national debt. Sounds reasonable on the surface, right? Agencies save money, employees get rewarded, debt gets paid down. What's the problem? The problem is the Trump administration is already illegally withholding funds that Congress appropriated, and this bill rewards that behavior. Walkinshaw pointed this out immediately. The Government Accountability Office has found at least 5 instances where the Trump administration violated the Impoundment Control Act. That's the law that says the president cannot refuse to spend money Congress has appropriated. It's been federal law since 1974, and Trump's Office of Management and Budget, run by Russ Vought, has been ignoring it. Let me give you some examples of what's been happening. The Trump administration illegally froze and cut federal funding for 5 states. OMB announced a government-wide initiative to identify federal spending provided to state, local, and tribal governments, colleges, and nonprofits in 14 states and D.C., all of which voted against Trump in 2024. They're targeting blue states for punishment by withholding funds Congress already appropriated. That's not legal, that's not constitutional, and this bill would incentivize them to keep doing it. Walkinshaw said it clearly. This bill would signal to the Trump administration that it endorses their illegal empowerment and withholding of funds, undermining Congress's power of the purse, and it would reward those actions. He's right. If you pass a bill that says agencies can keep money for not spending it, you're encouraging them to withhold funds illegally and call it efficiency. Here's what makes this even worse. All congressional appropriations that haven't been spent by the end of the fiscal year already return to the Treasury. That's current law, so this bill actually changes that. Instead of 100% going back to Treasury, now less than half goes back, another 49% stays with the agency for another year, and 2% goes to bonuses. The Congressional Budget Office will likely score this as costing money, not saving it. So Republicans are passing a bill that costs taxpayers money while rewarding illegal behavior. Then Representative Menendez jumped in with an even sharper point. He referenced an op-ed by Ezra Klein titled, "The Republican Party's NPC Problem and Ours." NPC stands for non-player character, a video game term for characters that have no agency, they just follow the script. And Klein's argument was that House Republicans are acting like NPCs, conceding their constitutional authority to Trump without any pushback. Menendez said, "Our Article 1 authority is very clear that we have exclusive rights and authorities to appropriate money. And what we've seen over the last 12 months is Donald Trump and this administration, Elon Musk, deciding that they're going to illegally and unconstitutionally infringe upon our Article 1 appropriations authority. And this bill incentivizes future administrations to do the exact same thing." He's absolutely right. Congress has the power of the purse. That's Article 1 of the Constitution. The president can't just decide not to spend money Congress appropriated because he doesn't like the program or because the state didn't vote for him. That's not how it works. And when Republicans pass bills like this, they're not just letting Trump violate the law, they're writing it into law for every future president. Menendez warned them directly. "I would urge my Republican colleagues to not be non-player characters, to stand up for our constitutional rights here. This is a permanent infringement that you are authorizing and incentivizing. In the future, it might be to states like yours, some of the states you represent. It might be to programs that you care about. That's the key point. Republicans think this only affects programs they don't like or states that didn't vote for Trump. But once you give this power to the president, it doesn't go away when your guy leaves office. The next Democratic president can use the same authority to withhold funds from red states. The next administration can freeze defense spending or farm subsidies or infrastructure projects in Republican districts. You're setting a precedent that destroys Congress's constitutional authority permanently." Representative Randall from Washington piled on. She pointed out that Russ Vought, Trump's OMB director and the architect of Project 2025, has been wreaking havoc by illegally withholding funds, rescinding grants, and reallocating money without congressional authorization. She said, "From the very beginning of last year, right after Trump's inauguration, we heard from organization after organization in our communities who unexpectedly had their funds frozen and have lived in chaos ever since. That's what this looks like in practice. Nonprofits that were promised federal grants suddenly can't access them. State programs that rely on federal funding get cut off without warning. Local governments that planned budgets around appropriated money are left scrambling. And all of it is illegal. The Impoundment Control Act specifically prohibits this. But Trump's doing it anyway, and this bill rewards him for it." Randall introduced a bill called the Office of Management and Budget Inspector General Act to create independent oversight of OMB and prevent this illegal withholding. That's the kind of bill Congress should be passing, one that enforces the law and holds the administration accountable. Instead, Republicans are passing a bill that encourages the illegal behavior. Now, Republicans defended the bill by saying, "We're $38 trillion in debt, and we need to cut spending." Representative Clay Higgins from Louisiana gave a whole speech about how federal spending is out of control and agencies need to be held accountable for waste, fraud, and abuse. And look, he's not wrong that the debt is a problem. But this bill doesn't solve that problem, it makes it worse. Here's why. Agencies already have every incentive to spend efficiently. If they waste money, Congress can cut their budgets in the next appropriations cycle. That's how oversight works. But what this bill does is create an incentive for agencies to withhold funds regardless of whether the spending is wasteful. If an agency can keep 49% of unspent money plus give out bonuses, they're going to find reasons not to spend money, even if that spending is necessary and legal. And more importantly, this bill doesn't address the actual problem, which is that the Trump administration is illegally withholding funds for political reasons, not efficiency reasons. They're not freezing money because a program is wasteful. They're freezing money because the state voted blue or the program is something Trump doesn't like. That's corruption. And this bill legalizes it. Walkinshaw, Menendez, and Randall all made the same point. If you care about Congress's constitutional authority, if you care about the rule of law, if you care about preventing future presidents from abusing power, you should oppose this bill. And Republicans passed it anyway, because they're more interested in protecting Trump than protecting the Constitution. Like, subscribe and share this everywhere.